Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Optimize Evony. This is the second episode of the Leveling Up Your Buffs series. This time I will be focusing on duty generals and how you can pretty massively increase your defense buffs by selecting the right duty generals and kind of ascending those in the right kind of order. So um, for I mean, obviously, you guys at this point all know that each of the important buildings here has a duty officer. You can basically choose, there's all these different levels, each of which will give different buffs for the specific building that you're targeting. Uh, you definitely want to try and target super buffs or super status for all of the generals because that's gonna improve all of your buffs, particularly on the troop building buildings and the embassy buildings. Embassy buildings will help your reinforcements have better buffs. Um, but yeah, one thing I do want to point out here, I'm sure most of you guys know this, but just in case you don't, um, basically once you get to the 1400 leadership and attack here, for example, for this one, um, and one thing to note there, that 1400 does not include dragons. So um, if you see that your buffs are or your stats are ahead of that, um, but uh, you're not able to hit the super quality or something like that, it's probably because your dragon is making up that difference. So dragons don't count for that, unfortunately. But uh, keep grinding on it. You'll get it eventually. Level up your generals. That's one of the best ways. And then obviously cultivating. The other thing is the power here. That's the power that you need to have when you're putting it in that duty gen slot. After you've done that, after it's gone to super, you can then take all of that gear off of that duty general officer, except for some very specific gear that you can get in the uh, kind of the bigger packs. So for example, the specific duty gen gears, right? So this one is the workshop officer's robe. This is on my workshop officer. It gives siege attack 5%, siege training capacity 10%, and then you can do all this refining here. There's usually really only one important stat that you're kind of targeting. In this case, I did siege HP. The other thing that they've recently updated that I will say is quickly talk about is if you have an additional scroll of this, you can advanced refine it and you can get additional buffs. This is really for only the mega coiners here, so I'm not going to go into it too much. I have you you can see my one equipment here. So this is it's not cheap to get. So but those that have it, make sure that you're finding it correctly and you're putting it on the right general. Yeah, other than that, you can take all the gear off of the generals. You only really need it while you're putting them into the slot. Um, but let's kind of dive into the duty generals really quick. So for each of the troop building buildings, they have uh, exposed these duty generals in the tavern. So Oleg is for the mount training building. Guan Rule is for the workshop officer. Toyotomi is rally spot. Uh, Askia is for the Trap Factory. John 1 is Archer Camp. Uh, this guy is the barracks officer. Uh, don't pay attention to that. That's not a free general. This guy's the academy officer. Skanderberg is hospital. Ban Chao is Archer Tower. So that's all of the free duty generals. And as I mentioned, they are all uh, they are all possible to get in the tavern. Um, Possible, not always easy to get. And so them by themselves will give some buffs, right? So, for example, Menshikov is construction speed, and you can also do the specialties to unlock additional buffs. The first and second ones do not apply to duty generals. The third usually will. You can tell when it says applied to a specific officer. So in this case, applied to keep officer, you get additional construction speed. And if I were to open this last one, I would get additional construction speed. So let's talk about ascending the duty generals. Because they are in the tavern, they're actually a really good place to get additional buffs. And why is that? So if we look at the actual ascending for any of the free duty generals, you will see that when the general is the specific officer, they'll get defense buffs here. So for example, one star on Oleg will give you in-city ground troop and mount troop defense 10% and HP 10%. So that's pretty good buffs. It takes a little bit to get that in research, and you basically get that just for starring this guy to 6 stars. And then, obviously, as it goes up, the buffs also improve. You also get some training speed, training capacity. Not super, super important there, but if you are training a bunch of T1s, sometimes that training capacity can help. So these buffs add up, right? Obviously, this is a 10-star general. This is one that I targeted. I had a bunch of copies of him. I was able to unlock him to 10 stars. But look at all of the buffs that you're able to get just by ascending this free duty general, this general that you can get in the tavern. You don't have to spend for this guy. You can get all of these buffs compared to trying to star an attack gen that might not be in the tavern, and is also not giving you defense buffs. So if you're really focusing on your defense buffs, which again, uh, you know, going back to the first video, you need to be able to defend yourself before you can attack, right? If you're getting soloed, if you're getting, rallied and dying easily, you're not going to be a very useful member of your team. You're not going to be giving positive points to your team, and you are going to essentially be a liability. You're not going to be able to, uh, you know, attack, which is where you want most of your points to be coming from, because that usually means that you're winning, right? You can choose which attacks to do. You can't really choose which defenses to take. You're eventually going to get caught without portals or something like that. And so again, these are super good buffs. That was just one of them. Guan has really good buffs. So basically, the other thing here is that typically the duty generals will specialize in either range troop and siege troop defense and HP, or ground troop and mount troop defense and HP. So either kind of the more ranged ones or the more melee troop types. And so as you saw on Oleg, his were all ground troop and mount troop buffs there. Guan is workshop officer, and so his is all range troop and siege HP ones here. So this also allows you an ability to target the specific buffs that are important to you first, right? So if you are really, you really are giving up a lot on siege solos or siege rallies, it's probably important to increase your siege HP first. If you're mostly getting attacked by archers, you want to increase your ground and mostly mount HP so that you're not giving up quite as much in those solos or rallies. So that gives you a kind of a nice way to be able to target those buffs first. So I started talking about basically the free duty generals, and I guess real quick before I move on to premium duty generals and kind of the when to use one versus when to use the other, I do want to talk about another couple specific cases. Um, the other thing with duty generals is there are a few duty generals that are super important to have to kind of start specializing. And one of those is Toyotomi. So Toyotomi is the rally spot officer. Again, these first two specialties don't apply. But if we look at his third, uh, awesome. You see applied to rally spot officer, March size capacity plus 6%. So that's an additional 6% rally or March size capacity that you have that you wouldn't have otherwise. And also if you don't have this guy, you absolutely need to have him. He's a tavern general, not super easy to get, but gives you an additional 5% march size just by having him in the rally spot. And then also, um, attacking troops attack and HP by 5% when you're in the rally spot officer. So again, those are pretty much free buffs there. Uh, get him, get him to super to unlock the additional buffs there, and then start specking him out for the additional march size capacity. Because this march size capacity will also scale as you level up and you level your rally spot. This will give you more and more benefit, right? Because it's a higher base capacity that you're buffing with this percent. And then the last March spec here is 10% March size capacity. So that's an additional 16% March size capacity just by doing the specials here. And I understand it's not always easy to get this last one, but I would argue that this is a really, really important one to have. Okay, maybe you do your important attacking generals first, get them to 4 stars. But really, I would say that this is maybe like the second, third one that you would maybe want to do behind maybe your archer general for PvP, and either your siege or mount general. Mount general if you're doing a lot more of bossing and you're kind of in that role for your alliance to kill a lot more bosses, and you're getting a bunch of wounded or something like that, then you maybe want to prioritize that. Otherwise, I think the march size capacity is super, super important, and you should prioritize that above um, kind of attacking generals and also your subgens. I know the subgen debuffs are super important, but if you're trying to attack, the march size capacity is also super important. So maybe take that with a grain of salt. If you're mostly defending, focus on your main wall gen and your maybe even your assistant wall gen and your debuff gens before doing this. But eventually you want to get to a point where you also can attack, right? No one wants to just sit and play defense after defense unless you're really built as a T1 trap. And but still, you're not really going to be contributing to rallies in your alliance if you're doing that. The one other one that I'll talk about first is that Menshikov. So these, as I talked about, most of the other ones had specific, it was either mount and ground or siege and range. This one actually gives you all troops, in-city troop defense, in-city troop HP, for the first two stars there. And I believe also Toyotomi also has something similar, right? Okay, so again, in-city troop defense plus 15, um, in-city troop defense plus 5, but then you get back to third star in-city troop HP 15%. So those are maybe ones that you would want to focus on starring first, because it doesn't just give the benefits to one troop type or two troop types. And so yeah, just wanted to cover that quickly before we talked about premium duty generals. So in addition to the free duty generals that you can get in the tavern, they of course have released premium duty generals that have way better buffs, but you have to pay money to get, or get very, very lucky in some of the events. So let's take a look at one of them. Okay, so Stilcho is essentially the replacement for Oleg. He's the stables officer. And so instead of, I think this was 5% mount troop attack, defense, and HP when the general is a stables officer for Oleg, this is 15% attack and 10% defense and HP. And then, as you can see here, I think this is about double what you would get with Oleg. And then here you also get this mount troop attack bonus here as well, which is super good. So just at the base stats, he's very good. Uh, but if we look at the defense capabilities, if you just get one of him, he's not going to be better than an Oleg that you've been able to ascend a little bit. And so let's look at his ascending real quick. So first star, in-city troop defense 15% and HP 15%. So that in itself is really good, right? Because then this is going to all troops, all in-city troops, defense and HP. So that's kind of combining both the mount and ground and the siege and range. So that's obviously much better. Um, you get debuff here, debuff here. So those are important, but those aren't really adding to your buffs. It's just to your debuffs, and it's kind of expensive to get that. So I would say that in this case, you should really, if you're thinking about switching to Stilcho, you should have enough to at least get him to 1 star, right? Because it's pretty easy to get Oleg to 2 or 3 stars. You just essentially need the blood of Ares. Uh, but here you need to then get to 4 stars to really get back to the in-city buffs. Again, not discounting the uh, defense and HP debuff. In particular, the HP debuff, particularly because it debuffs siege, is super worthwhile, but it is a lot of copies of this guy that you would need, right? So the first star is 1 extra copy, so you need 2 total. The second star you need 2 extra copies, or 2 in addition to the first one, so 3 plus the original one, so total of 4. And then uh, the third star, I mean, it basically goes, you need 1 copy here, 2 copies, 3 copies, 4 copies, and 5 copies. So it obviously gets significantly harder, especially since you can't just refresh the tavern to get more of this general. And so this is one general that I would say that unless you have a lot of copies of, you should probably just stick with Oleg. And if you're not, if you're a big coiner, you'll know that. You'll know that I can get more copies of this guy when he comes out. There's specific events that are good for getting these premium duty generals. One of them is the Trial of Knights general. Um, general, token typically will give you at least one or a chance at least one kind of premium general, and then also a number of other good generals. And so if you're tripling that or doubling that, and getting a number of them, it's likely that you're going to be able to unlock a couple of them. But again, this gets super, super expensive. So You really have to, when you're considering the duty generals, the free versus the premium generals, you have to look at these things. What buffs are you actually getting? Because they're duty generals, it's very simple. You can look at their base skill, their ascension, and how many of the ascension levels you're actually going to feasibly be able to do, and then their third skill and fourth skill if you have the runes to be able to unlock them. And so, yeah, like I said, not all generals will be worth it. There are some that are maybe a little bit easier to make a trade-off for. For example, let's look at uh, oh, this guy's the hospital officer. Let's look at this guy, Heracles. So this guy is the embassy officer, and he increases siege attack by 35% and reduces enemy troop defense by 15% when they're the embassy officer. Amazing base stat. That's that's pretty awesome. And then let's look at uh, the specialties here: reinforcement capacity and reinforcement attack when they're the embassy officer. That's awesome as well. And then again, additional siege attack and enemy troop HP. That enemy troop HP is amazing. Again, debuffing that siege HP if you're getting attacked by siege solos or rallies. That's awesome. And let's look into the ascension. Okay, maybe this first star isn't the best. This next one's a little bit better. Uh, this one's getting a little bit better as well. But a lot of it's reinforcing stats, which are it's important, but it's not super important for uh, there's a lot of ways to get buffs, and these are not less in. There's a few of them that are in city, but the rest of them are reinforcing. And so, you know, reinforcing 10% defense and HP, you think about like your gear or your finds or your research, like a lot of that is pretty easy to get. You can, essentially get that in like a couple researches in the normal academy. Obviously, if you can ascend this guy, he's still better than if you didn't have him. Um, but I would say he is one of the cases where I would recommend, if you can get a copy of him, absolutely throw him in the embassy officer. And why that is because there is no free uh, duty general for the embassy officer. There's no free duty general for the holy place. There's no free duty general for the military academy. There's no free duty general for the trap factory. No, there is actually for the trap factory. For the research factory, actually don't know if they've added a research factory premium duty general. I would have to look. Um, but again, the cool things is that these generals were a cake 10 general at one point, right? So that means that you have to essentially get all the way down to the level 10 on the cake, which is approximately $2,000 US dollars, and is, in my opinion, just way too expensive to try and get a general. You do also get civ gear and usually a keep with that, but again, you get one copy of them, and so for most duty generals, you'd have to do that trade-off. Is this going to be better than the normal duty general? For these ones, obviously you don't have that trade-off because you're still getting positive buffs in that case. But one of the kind of tricks there is to look for the Trial of Knights um, pack, and again, see if one of these guys is in there. So, for example, I know I had talked about uh, don't don't look at uh, don't look at my trivia So this duty general is the holy place officer, and uh, she was in the Trial of Knights pack, and so essentially you were able to get a premium duty general uh, that was at the Cake 10, the $2,000 level for $100, or and you could triple $100 and potentially even get multiple copies of her. Um, and I would say her ascensions are significantly better, right? You're getting some important things: in-city range troop and siege attack, and defense, uh, in-city siege HP. That's always important. Healing speed. Again, it gets better and better as you go down. And so I guess what I would say is if you're trying to plan out your coining, don't forget to look in those duty general packs in the Trial of Knights to see if you can pick up one of the ones that actually makes sense to use, right? That actually makes sense uh, to get one copy of, rather than the free duty generals, because the free duty generals I would recommend to almost everyone, except for the kind of the top coiners. Um, so yeah, just a quick recap. We kind of talked about all of these things. These are the duty generals are a great way to increase your in-city buffs, um, increase your defense, and really, if you are ascending these things correctly, you're getting hundreds of percentages of buffs when you're defending, and that can make a huge difference when you're trying to take those solos or rallies, and will really allow you to stay alive, to be able to then do counterattacks, counter rallies, and things like that. Um, so that's really what I had for you guys today. Next episode, I will be talking about the Blazons. It'll be a much shorter episode because I've done other videos on Blazons, but this is specifically, kind of different trade-offs that you're going to be making with your Blazons based on what kind of player you are. And so if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe so that you can be notified when that video releases. And I'll try and be put out a few more regularly here, so that if you're kind of waiting for the next one, you won't have to wait quite as long. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.